Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Ahkam SOS, the show that discusses Islamic duties and practices. Once again, we'd like to extend our gratitude and our thanks to all the viewers in this time of self-isolation and self-quarantine. We understand that it is very, very difficult for you guys at home, and also you could probably relate and understand with us that we are not allowed to go to our studios, and therefore this is why we've had to go to this format in order to continue our live broadcasting. But inshallah, we will continue, and we send our thanks to you, and inshallah you'll be enjoying these discussions that we have every week. I'm your host Mohsin Shah, and joining me is Sheikh Ali Ma. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikhna.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
How are you this evening?
Alhamdulillah, fine. Alhamdulillah.
MashaAllah, excellent, excellent. So, Sheikhna, we've talked a lot about different topics. We've talked about, coronavirus. We've talked about, business and economics. We've talked about, things to do and things not to do. Ramadan is not far away, and one of the beauties of Ramadan is the Qur'an. So, inshallah, this discussion we'll have, inshallah, is on the Qur'an. And the first question I want to ask is, what is the etiquette of reciting the glorious book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala?
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين. As you mentioned that we are approaching to this great month at the doorstep of the holy month of Ramadan, the spring of Qur'an, the spring of reciting this holy book in this great month. Of course, there are etiquettes, there are rules which requires to be done before the recitation of the Holy Qur'an. Now, they could be mustahab in somehow. For example, to have the wudu before recitation of the Holy Qur'an. Very recommended that the one be in the state of tahara and purity and wudu at all times, and specifically when it comes to the recitation of the Holy Qur'an, of the dua, the ziyarah, entering the mosques, the holy shrine is to be in the state of wudu. Also, for the one who wish to recite the Holy Qur'an, to face the Qibla, so sits towards the Qibla and recite the Holy Qur'an. Observing the manners of the Holy Qur'an, if the one can read it with tajweed, with tartil, for example, that would be great as a style of recitation, as well as reflecting and pondering on the ayat of the Holy Qur'an, trying to understand the meanings. If you don't speak Arabic, you can use the translation to find out the meanings of the word. For example, what does it mean, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim? You try to stop on this holy verse, an important verse in the Holy Qur'an, that what does it mean, the most merciful, the most beneficent, and so forth. So these are, just basic etiquettes of reading the Qur'an, which are important, of course, to bear in mind.
Ahsant. And also, Sheikhna, along with reciting the Qur'an, we understand that there's a lot of thawab, especially in the Ramadan. And inshallah, when Ramadan comes, there will be discussions on the Qur'an in Ramadan. But when it comes to reciting the Qur'an, is it possible to donate that thawab to the marhum, maybe an individual who's actually living as well?
Yes, it is permissible to send the thawab of your recitation of the Holy Qur'an, your ziyarah, the dua you make for the mu'mineen when they're alive. That's fine, absolutely fine. As we do so with the loved ones who passed away from this world, that we recite Surah Yasin, for example, for the deceased one. No, we can do the same thing and send the thawab for those who are still living in this world.
I see, excellent. Sheikhna, there is something within our community that we hear a lot, is that when the Quran is being recited, you shouldn't speak, you should stay quiet, you should listen to the Quran, listen to the dhikr. Is it mandatory to be silent and pay attention, or is this something that just, wives' tales, or something that the community just say?
No, of course, it is mustahab to do so. When somebody is reciting the Holy Qur'an, the one should listen and ponder and reflect to the ayat. أسمعوا وأنصتوا. There's a verse in the Holy Qur'an which mentions that if the Holy Quran was recited, then listen, and listen carefully. You try to reflect on these verses. So recommended very much that we try to listen if there was a reciter, be it the reciter over the TV, the radio, or even live recitation. We try to respect this holy book by listening and reflecting at the same time.
I see. And Shaykhna, what about if there's a gathering which the Holy Quran is being recited? What's the rule regarding the gatherings? I mean, we've been to a Fatiha where, at the mosque where you come, everyone's sitting down on chairs. There'll be one qari on the member or in the middle of the gathering reciting the Quran. Ahkam-wise, what is our ruling regarding this?
I just said that the one should listen and pay attention to the reciter of the Holy Quran, to the verses of the Quran, and it is makruh, it is discouraged and disliked to talk and chat while the Quran is being read and is recited.
Obviously,
So
yes.
sadly, we see this in some majalis, in some fawatih, in some gatherings that you see 2 or 3 people are talking and ignoring these words of Allah, especially when it comes to the mentioning of the judgment day, the adab, the punishment, hellfire, na'udhu billah, in which the one should really think about it and really feel sad about it, that na'udhu billah, that and ask Allah to refuge to Allah Azza wa Jal from the adab al-akhirah. So it's better that we teach ourselves in not talking and chatting while the Quran is being recited.
I said, inshallah, that's something we can all adopt, inshallah, next time we're in the mosque when we can hear the Quran being recited. As you know, that this is a live show, and we do take in your questions. So if you have a question you'd like to ask, please send it into the WhatsApp or on the email address, should be below here, somewhere around, and we'll do our best to answer your question. We don't need to know your name, we don't need to know where you're typing from, where you're asking from, or anything like that. There's no question too silly or too taboo or too strange for us. It is our duty as Muslims, and especially as the Sheikh, it is duty to portray the knowledge of Islam and the law. Inshallah, we can do that for you. Just send in your questions and we'll do our best. And we have a question here, Sheikhna, if you allow me, from the email. If one is in session of reciting the Holy Qur'an and comes across one of the verses of prostration, but he does not know whether or not this is one of the obligatory prostrations, does he have to inquire as to whether or not it is obligatory? And if one learns that it is obligatory, is it mandatory for him to perform the qada of this pass that has passed? So someone heard a Quranic ayah and wasn't sure if it was a wajib sujood to perform or a mustahab sujood. Now, I know that there are 4 wajib sujoods in the Quran, and I think there's 11 mustahab, 15 in total. So Shaykhna, if someone doesn't know, I know Surah Najm has a wajib one, and so
Yes.
I think Surah Alaq as well also has a wajib sujood.
Yeah.
So let's say he was listening to a surah, and he didn't know if it was, he or she didn't know if it was wajib or not. Is it mandatory upon that person to go find out and do an investigation? And if they discover, yes, it was a wajib one, do they have to perform the qada of this sujood?
No, it is not mandatory for the one to find out and to inquire about, if this ayah, which is recited now, is a wajib ayah or mustahab ayah in that gathering. But if he was told or became known that no, it was actually one of the wajib sujoods which was recited, then he should do the qada of the prostration or the sujood afterwards.
Awesome. We're going to go to a short break now, Sheikhna. Inshallah, to brothers and sisters as well, going for a short break. Inshallah, join us after the break as we continue our discussion here on Ahkam SOS. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.
his head each night, so I may breathe. I am the resplendent sterling silver orb, accompanying the earth in unwavering loyalty. I come out at night to guide your steps. I play hide and seek with you, sometimes hiding behind a cloud-like veil, sometimes reigning like the matriarch of the skies. I master the oceans, making them rough then tranquil. My sirens call to them just as apparent in mankind. Maybe that is why, when people fall in love, they sometimes call that person after me. Even I have admired such beauty. The most beautiful person I ever gazed upon was a man called Abbas, the one who introduced
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Ahkam SOS, the show that discusses Islamic duties and practices. Before the break, we were discussing the Qur'an and the etiquettes of the Qur'an, and whether you hear wajib sujood, are you meant to investigate and inquire if it was a wajib one or not, if you weren't aware, and so forth. Inshallah, let's continue the discussion with Sheikh Ali Ma'a. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikhna.
Assalamu alaikum.
Welcome back. Sheikhna, there is this thing that we have in Islam where when someone makes a mistake, especially a lecturer, we speak to them in private and on the side and let them know quietly, what we thought was wrong with what they have said and so forth. What happens in regards to recitation of the Qur'an? You and I both know to recite the Qur'an incorrectly is a major sin. So when it comes to sitting down in a gathering, listening to someone recite Qur'an, and that person makes a mistake, are we supposed to stay quiet? Maybe afterwards, once the event is over, go up to the Qari and say, listen, you on this ayah, you read it wrong, please be careful next time, please be aware of what you're trying to recite? Or should they correct it there and then? For example, when we pray Salah, and if the Imam of Jama'ah, he makes a mistake in the surah, the person behind has to correct him there and then. So is this the same issue, and is this the same accompanancy that we have upon ourselves, the same action we have to take when Quran is being recited in a gathering?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Well, initially, if somebody reads the Holy Quran mistakenly, if he is deliberate, then of course, the one who wants to mock the Quran, of course, that's a major sin. But if it's just a mistake by the reciter, it's not a sin, it's a mistake, he needs to correct his recitation. And it's preferred if this reciter was reciting in a gathering and he was reading some of the verses or the words wrongly, then the one should draw his attention, instead of causing some kind of discredit or disrespect, to draw his attention and tell them that, or you can just repeat the same verse or the word correctly, instead of telling him, oh, you're reciting wrongly, and so forth. So we try to correct the reciter in a good manner and a good way that it doesn't discredit this individual.
Ahsant, understood. Sheikhna, if one memorizes a surah, now, mashallah, as young children, this is part of our madrasa learning, is to actually, do hifz and to learn the short surahs. I beg your pardon. The short surahs that we have at the end of Juz Amma, at the end of the Quran, and maybe later on, because we don't recite the surahs often, or we don't memorize them well enough and revise them well enough, we forget these surahs as well sometimes. So once you have learned a surah, and let's say you have forgotten it, is it mandatory upon you to revise that surah and learn it again?
Well, it's preferred to, keeping the knowledge of the Quran in overall, for the one who memorizes the Holy Quran, who knows the tafsir, who knows the Ahkam Tajweed and so forth, to keep them in his mind or her mind and try to keep it alive all the time, maybe by continuous recitation, training and so forth, and even teaching others. That would help to keep and retain the ilm of the Quran in all fields. If somebody forgets some of the surahs, some of the recitation, tajweed, ahkam, and so forth, the one can relearn and again memorize the Holy Quran, which is of course preferred. In the hadith we have that the one who recites the Holy Quran in the Day of Judgment, they will tell him, read or recite and elevate. Iqra warqa. So by each ayah, that individual would elevate towards the levels of the paradise, of course.
MashaAllah, ahsant. Inshallah, we'll have a discussion on that sometime in the near future. Shaykhna, when it comes to hifz, many could argue that the Shia are not very strong when it comes to hifz and memorizing the Quran, and that other denominations may be far more advanced in terms of memorization and also in terms of recitation, the tajweed rules. So my question is that do you feel that the Shia don't concentrate enough in this field?
Initially, this is not correct, because for the past few decades we've seen that countries with majority Shia population have concentrated greatly on nurturing reciters and those who can memorize the Holy Quran. In Iran itself, we have many reciters and those who can memorize the Holy Quran fully, from cover to cover, and all ages. From the age of 5, we have till adults, elderly people as well, who can memorize, who can recite the Holy Quran, tajweed, tartil. Likewise in Iraq, likewise in Pakistan, likewise in Africa now we have, mashallah, reciters who from the Shia of Ahl Bayt alayhim salam. So we have, alhamdulillah, this concentration on the Holy Quran. However, we can argue that yes, the other sects of Islam have more concentration, or they have spent more time and means in order to develop the recitation process and the progress. In terms of the tajweed, for example, we have the school of Egypt, very famous with their tajweed recitation. We have the Arabian as well,
I believe.
Exactly, the Arabian as well, in Tartil, the Arabia as well, in Tartil, they've done very well, good work, but that's not enough, because concentrating on the outside of the Quran is fine, but that's not enough. What gives us the merit and the distinction is that we have concentrated mostly on the inside of the Quran, mafhum al-Quran, comprehension of the Quran, understanding the ayat of the Quran. For example, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the word imamah or imam in the Quran, and He says that I have assigned and appointed you to be the imam. إِنِّي جَاعِلُكَ لِلنَّاسِ إِمَامًا. Allah says to Ibrahim alayhi salam, I've assigned you as the imam. وَجَعَلْنَاهُمْ أَئِمَّةً يَهْدُونَ بِأَمْرِنَا. And we have appointed them as imams and leaders. When they neglect these words and verses, that's very clear. If Allah appoints the prophets, He also appoints their vicegerents and leaders. How come I have to, for example, see that after the demise of the Prophet ﷺ, that some groups rushed towards the gathering of Bani Sa'ida and appointed someone who was just recently a mushrik, who was a kafir, who used to drink alcohol, who used to do such and such of indecent acts. How come that he is now the leader of the Muslims? And they have mentioned that Imam Ali alayhi salam never worshipped any statues or idols. That's why they call him Karramallah Wajhah. May Allah bless his face, because he never prostrated on any of these idols and statues. So we follow the one who is best, who is better than the others. So Alhamdulillah, we are proud that we have followed the correct interpretation and tafsir of the Holy Qur'an, and it concentrated on the inside of the Qur'an rather than just the outside of the Qur'an.
Ahsant. Shaykh, we're running out of time, so this is going to be my final question for you, and that is it permissible for one to sit while the Qur'an is behind him?
Well, if that leads to disrespecting the Holy Qur'an in anyhow, then of course it is not permissible. And then sadly we have some of the mosques or the centers where they have decorated their pulpits with the ayat al-Qur'aniyah. Sometimes the ayah reaches the bottom part of the reciter, of the Maulana, or whoever who sits on that pulpit. And that is, of course, doesn't really look nice, because it might, in some of disrespect, while his let's say his leg or part of his body next to the eye of the Quran. So we have to basically think about this more before we actually build these or construct these members and so forth.
Thank you very much, Sheikh. Thank you to all of you for joining us. Inshallah, we'll be back on Wednesday at 6:30 for another discussion on Ahkam SOS. Please be careful out there. The quarantine is still going on. Cases are still there and rising in terms of the coronavirus. Wash your hands, be cautious, be vigilant, stay healthy and take care of yourselves. And inshallah, we'll see you on Wednesday 6:30 on Imam Hussein TV. From myself and from Sheikh, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.